So, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Amanda Quinn here with Quinn Growth Advisors. Um, we are a growth agency focused on helping small to medium sized BPOs refine their go to market strategy, their messaging, and their sales process to accelerate revenue. And unlike traditional firms, we work on a results basis, working both on a retainer and a commission basis so that we win when our clients win, and we're really aligned in that way. And the reason that we're here today is that in talking to BPOs, it's a reoccurrent thing that most firms I think are struggling with this moment and navigating this moment and trying to decide what they want to do when it comes to AI, when it comes to technology. Are they building that? Are they going to partner with third party solutions? Are they going to do nothing? Are they going to sell? And so I'm so thankful that Shervin Taleo was willing to join me on this conversation, because he, as a former CEO, and I'll let him introduce himself in a moment, but he has a unique vantage point having built a BPO and then sold it later. And he is an open book and is really wanting to answer any questions that folks have about what goes into building your own technology and then eventually selling it. And so this is really meant to be an earnest conversation. So any questions you have, please feel free to put them in the Q&A and we will try to get to them all. We're leaving plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So with that, Shervin.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and welcome everyone. I'm going to walk through this pretty quickly. I'm really excited to get to the Q&A and exchange ideas with all of you. This is what I want to cover. I'm going to go quickly, and Amanda, just sort of if I'm going too fast or if I'm spending too much time, just interrupt me, push me along. This is loosely what I want to cover. The first and foremost, like why, how did I earn the right to even have a point of view on this topic? I think it's relevant that you know that. You should always feel free to interrogate the context of someone's point of view, and I want to share mine very openly with you. Just a brief refresh on disruptive innovation. Specifically how I dealt with the BPO valuation decline and, what those options look like. And then just tell you my own story specifically. And then, like we said, Q&A. So very, very quickly, I started this last company that I sold, which it's now been 12 or 13 months since I sold it. This was my third startup. Prior to Partner Hero, I'd done hard tech, synchronizing voice and data together. We had a consumer play. We also had an enterprise play. And then in my 20s, when fresh out of comp sci, with an engineering background, I did a software startup there too. But in between that, I spent a lot of time in management consulting. I was a partner at Accenture. I've done large scale work. I've done startups. I've done a few different things. Partner Hero, this is an actual picture from the first office that we had, and it held 24 people. We had like 7 people actually working. So whenever we had to do a photo shoot, we'd have people invite their friends over to make it look busy. But Partner Hero, I started 11 years ago or so. And for those of you who know Andy Lee, he's the founder of Alorica. He was a friend, and our kids went to school together. And he's the one who turned me on to San Pedro Sula, Honduras. That's how we ended up there. So that's a little bit about my professional journey. The interesting thing was that like this is the original logo, and this is how we positioned the company. It was People Plus, and we talked about combining people and technology. And coming out of software and having done, Accenture level type of outsourcing, I just knew that, just providing labor alone, although you could make money, it was hard to defend it. Because as a CFO, and I dealt with Fortune 500 companies, the CFO would say to me, this is for like Fortune 50 companies, they say like, okay, we have earnings coming up, we've got the situation coming up, and we would move them to Eastern Europe. Let's say we'd move them to Prague, and then after that, we'd move them, somewhere else. You can only play that game once or twice. You can't go to the Philippines twice. That cost takeout happens one time, right? And so what becomes more sustainable? It has to be proprietary, methods, IP, other, a different business model, et cetera. That's what I tried to do there. In fact, my ICP, my ideal customer profile, for Partner Hero were new economy businesses and startups. And what they wanted from me, because they were like rapidly iterating on their own product, they wanted a BPO that felt a lot like a tech startup. And so one of the first things that I built was our QA software. And this is an actual screenshot from Apricot, which is what we used to call it. And it was with a K and it was apricot.io. It was not meant to, initially, it was not meant to commercialize. We did eventually actually commercialize it very softly. But the need to build this tool came from an actual QA calibration that I had with Udemy. At the time, I was also I wasn't just the founder and CEO of the company, but I was leading our largest program, which at the time was Udemy. And I'm on a call with their QA team and my QA team, and we're going through this spreadsheet. And I'm looking at it, I'm like asking them, if I built something, would you all consider using it? And they said, of course, we hate the spreadsheet. So that was the birth of our software aspirations at Partner Hero was this product. AI is new, but disruption isn't. So I feel like this is an important place to revisit. Um, the interesting context for what we have today is that, everyone you hear say, well, AI is different, AI is different. I would say yes and no. I would say yes and no. And we can kind of parse that a little bit later. Um, the, some fun facts around here. The CEO of Blockbuster Video, just 18 months prior to declaring bankruptcy, was on an earnings call. And I happen to have his PowerPoint from that earnings call. And he was touting the revenue per square foot, which is a retail metric. And the analysts on Wall Street and everyone, they pine for around this particular metric. He just couldn't grok the idea that actually was going to be irrelevant only 18 months later. And the timeline is kind of fascinating because a lot of these things feel improbable and they're very slow. They start off actually very slow. But by the time you realize it's happening, it becomes very challenging. In fact, Blockbuster built, I was at Accenture, we did this for them. They built a Netflix competitor. And when you went into a store, they would say, well, you can get a DVD or you can sign up for this thing and, whatever. But by that time, the ship had sailed. Another interesting point that I'll share with you are, what I found interesting was Uber and the impact it had on medallions. Medallions are essentially the right to have a licensed taxi within a certain geography. And I'm going to do some analysis. I'm going to share some analysis that we did on the medallion valuations and what I believe is a corollary to the environments that we're facing today. In around 2014 was when uh, you know we see this big impact. Okay, the medallions in New York City at their peak were selling for a little over $1 million. And what happened when Uber was introduced in New York was just this vicious decline. And there were and I remember this at the time. There was a talk of trying to regulate Uber, not give them, revoke their license to operate in New York, not let them go to the airports. I mean, they were trying all sorts of things to prevent this thing from happening, right? And what I remember about this, I grew up in New York, so this story kind of hits home, is that they were actually people. financing and coming together to try to stabilize the market for medallions. Because if you had just bought a medallion, this was like, spending all your life savings and borrowing money basically to do this. And you'd amortize it over the next 20, 30 years. This is going to be your career. This is like basically your franchise, what you're going to do. And what we can see, this is like long tail data here. The values have just never recovered. And if you look at the secondary markets, there's a prediction that they will never recover. In fact, they will continue to decline, although not as much because most of the value capture has already been taken out of this. This is interesting because you can also see a similar pattern with BPO valuations from the introduction of ChatGPT. And I just took a few public companies here. I don't mean to pick on any one company or anything like that. And this is not a reflection on, how good or bad the management is or anything like that. It's just, a few different sizes, a few different comps to sort of take a look at. The BPO valuations have systematically been compressed. This is no surprise to anyone on this call. I don't need to tell you about this. Uh, but it is my conviction, and it's not an, I'll there are a few things that I'll share in this call today that I will go out on a limb and say this is my conviction. I'm putting my own money into it, meaning I'm not just sort of talking, but I'm actually placing bets on these sorts of things. It is my conviction that BPO valuations will not recover. And there's a band that they play in. I do not believe that the AI apocalypse is upon us right away. I'm not one of those folks. I think we're far away from AGI or anything like that. But looking at Uber and looking at Tesla and looking at other things, which I'm going to get into, I don't see a path to recovering. So let's talk about the myths that we hear a lot about in these conversations. And I get probably once a month, I get an email or a phone call from a CEO, a founder of a large BPO. And this is one of the things that they discuss. So they say, like, we're not ready to do anything. We're going to grow our way back to a good valuation. Just we're not ready. We're not ready. Cool. I totally hear that. Um, but disruptive calibrations are permanent. They reset the market. And in fact, what we see is that the multiples tend to decline faster than you can grow. Um, just looking at a few different companies here, uh, the value, the equation basically is like what multiple are you going to get and versus how fast you're going to grow your revenue. Now, if you're convinced that you can grow your business at 30+% year over year, then probably you're safe. Okay. I believe, and I think there's data to support this, that although it's not going to go to zero, I'm not, again, an AI absolutist. I believe that this is much like the medallion business, and it will continue to compress until it stabilizes to a fraction of what it is today. And we can talk about what I think it's going to look like later on. But today, we know what the multiples are, hovering around 5, 6, 7 times EBITDA. We know some of these companies are trading. I mean, T-Tech's revenues in over $1 billion, and the market cap is 150 or something like that. I mean, it's ridiculous how cheap they've become, right? And you will not be able to grow your way out of this when this is the predicament of everyone. Okay. What is happening right now, the folks with the medallions, everyone is trying to sell because they could see Uber what it was doing. And that further compresses the valuations. You're just not going to be able to grow your way out of it. And we can look at the auto industry as a good corollary. This was the practice that I ran at Accenture, and prior to that, so I'm somewhat familiar with the automotive industry. Revenue, in terms of like the traditional automotive, I just took GM, Ford, and Toyota just to kind of give you like what I would consider the big three. I don't put Chrysler into that mix. Uh, it was 7 times greater than Tesla. Okay. I mean, it's significant, right? But if you look at the value capture and what Tesla has done, and I'm not even showing 2025 numbers. I mean, if I show you that, I mean, your jaw would drop, right? But the market is essentially saying we do not care about the revenue of the big three. The revenue is meaningless to us because they are permanently categorized as a manufacturing company, whereas Tesla is being viewed as an AI, autonomous vehicle, software type of company. And this is, I believe, what is happening to our industry, sadly. So let's look at some of the options here. There is an option zero, which is do nothing. And I want to be very clear. This is absolutely an option. You know, today there are travel agents. Now, there aren't 100,000 travel agents. There are very few. But yes, for some very specialized travel, group travel, travel for schools and things like that, there are some travel agency and they still exist. But there was a time when to buy a ticket, you physically had to drive to an office of a travel agent and go and buy that. Those agencies are no longer here. But yes, some BPOs in some shape or form are absolutely going to survive. And there are different paths for that. I think there are certain industries that will be later to AI adoption, just like with the cabs, the taxis, there'll be a push to try to protect their turf and things like that. It could be in healthcare, it could be in a few different places. But even in healthcare, you should see what's happening with AI in healthcare. I think it would alarm you. But let's just say that there are a few industries that AI adoption will come a little bit later. Um, I think it's totally fine to juice the profits and hoard cash for a period of time. I think that's totally fine. If you're running a sort of a mom and pop BPO, uh, that makes sense. Like if you're not carrying any debt service and you kind of want to be the last McDonald's franchisee in your area, I think that's totally fine. But long term, let's just be clear, if you're thinking about an exit, this will limit your exit options because long term, I believe we're gonna get to 2 to 3 times EBITDA. And the more importantly, perhaps, the pool of buyers will continue to shrink. I think that's actually an important point to come back to.
Hmm.
Amanda, am I going too fast or too slow
No,
or
I think that you're doing great.
good?
You're great.
All right. So option one, partnership. And I think this is a really great and interesting option. I'm going to share some information on what that looks like. But you can get up and running very quickly. You can build some credibility because you don't have to transform yourself. You can say, look, I'm connected to a Codif, I'm connected to Ada or whoever, and this is what I do. This is how I go to market. You do need to know that in those partnerships, signing the deal is the easy part. It's on paper. Doing deals requires real focus, real work, because this is unlike a traditional sale. The contract will be different. The business model will be different. How do you price it? This is a really big question that comes up. And I think you can have a lot of short to midterm success. We've seen press releases from Awesome CX. We've seen press releases from a number of BPOs that have done joint deals. And I think in the midterm, short to midterm, you can have some success with this. If possible, I would find ways to have a financial tie-up with them. I think so. This moves beyond a paper business development deal, but to a joint offering. How about if we carve out a specific segment or a specific industry, you make some investments, any type of exclusivity that you can get. I think that would be very wise. The challenge is value capture. And I'll go back to where, I was an executive at Accenture. I'll just give you some history here. SAP is trading at 23 times EBITDA. Accenture is trading at 11 times EBITDA. Accenture has like 800 or 900,000 employees, and they do almost twice the revenue that SAP does. but the value capture goes to the software company. And so again, just I'm not saying don't do this. This is absolutely something that you can do, but this will not be an equitable transaction. Let's just be very, very clear about where the value will be captured and what that will, look like long term. And I'm using Accenture as an example here. Accenture is not a traditional BPO. They have a large consulting arm. They do custom software. They do many, many different things. They've acquired a ton of software companies. They're actually being valued closer to a software multiple than a pure services multiple. So I'm being very generous here when I'm saying that this is what it could look like. But again, this is something for the audience to consider.
And just to be clear, Sherman, SAP and Accenture have a partnership, right? Like I think you clearly state
A
that, right?
deep, deep partnership. We have I'm no longer there. We had centers around the world where we jointly developed software. We had joint offerings just for the oil and gas industry, for consumer packaged goods, deep IP, co-developed. Um,
And the value is
this was
going to
not a
SAP.
this was
Yeah.
not a paper partnership. I mean, we committed to having like 20,000 people certified on their technology to be able to do their deployment, et cetera. So the largest integrator worldwide for SAP. Option two, which is what I pursued at Partner Hero, build it yourself. Um, and I'm here to tell you that this can be done. This absolutely can be done. You have to have the stomach for it, but it can be done. And this is not about hiring a CTO. I've tried. And again, I come from software. I had done two software startups prior. Um, so I'm sharing. I'm not saying I'm an expert. I'm not saying that I know better than everyone else. I'm just saying that like I even with that, I'm just saying that it's challenging, and just I want you to have your eyes wide open here. Not all BPOs are going to be a good fit for build it yourself. So if you have insufficient customer scale, if you have like a dozen customers, you're not going to get sufficient leverage from your technology investment. Okay. And the requirements will end up becoming so customized for a very small number that it's going to be hard to replicate as you add more customers. So that's one thing to consider. If you don't have revenue scale, because you got to feed the beast, you got to, you're diverting cash. I'm saying 50+% of your free cash. Um, and you're going to need access to patient capital. The return on this we can talk about, but you're talking about years. You're not talking about weeks or months. So
I just want to put a
that's
pin
one
in that
leg.
for a second. So you're saying
Yeah.
that they're going to have to just to make it clear for everyone that's watching. So to build it yourself or to buy, we're talking about you needing to divert a significant amount of your profits that are coming out of your business every single month to this venture, or take on additional investors to help you. And so go through the fundraising process of finding the right investors, finding those that have the same vision with you, which I feel like for many BPOs, especially those that have bootstrapped their way to growth, that's a completely different beast unto itself, the fundraising process. So just to kind of
Yes.
highlight, those are very different big asks unto themselves, let alone the DNA and the scale that you need to have.
Absolutely. You've got the big change management, right? You've got your employees and the culture of the company, which has been basically growth means adding more people, right? To a culture where growth means how much of this can we let software or AI specifically handle? Your salespeople have been selling based on like how big the deal is. Now they're going to have to think about like MRR, which is a software metric, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's because, and then with AI, it's not even, MRR is more SaaS-like. With AI, we're getting into outcomes-based pricing, we're getting into different models. And then you've got your customer base. Your customer base sees you as a labor, not I want to say labor only, but let's say labor plus type of firm. And now you're going to have to convince them that you do something different. You can do something differently. So this becomes a challenge as well. And to just give you like an idea here, Salesforce, a very large public software company, the market is saying that we don't believe Salesforce is an AI company. And we don't believe Salesforce can pivot from being a SaaS company to an AI company. Now, this is sobering news. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, we're talking about pivoting from a BPO company to a BPO plus, let's say BPO plus AIs in some shape or form. A SaaS company with access to capital the way Salesforce does, the market is discounting them. Okay, just something to think about. AI is not like SaaS. Okay, SaaS is about marginal improvements and productivity, et cetera. Long term, the Wall Street and the public and private capital markets are betting that AI is about job displacement. And on this point, before I move on, I just want to say this. I see all the hype. I live in Northern California. I see all the hype about AI and the billboards and all that shit. I'm old enough to have been through multiple of these things. Okay. No, I think everyone on this call is mature, sober, has consciousness. I don't believe that that's going to happen in the next year or two or whatever. But do I believe it's going to happen within the next 10 years? Absolutely, I do. Yeah. So this is not an alarmist message, and this is not about reaction. It's about very thoughtfully understanding that there are incentives for the AI companies to provoke fear the way that they are. But I don't want any of us to be the Blockbuster CEO 18 months prior to declaring bankruptcy, touting our revenue per square foot. I have hundreds of such examples, having worked with Fortune 100 companies and also having done startups. So I've seen this playbook a little bit before. I'm just saying that this is a place where we need to focus. Um, Continuing with build it yourself, it's really about a conversion mindset. And you're I cannot stress this enough, Amanda. Your customers are going to have to change how they pay you. To
Mhm.
fully buy into this model, you cannot show your labor and then a little bit of AI. You have to come up with a new integrated model. Because if you do show labor with a little bit of AI, they'll say, well, so and so makes this other AI. I just want to slap that onto your labor. You will continue to compress your margins.
Yep.
This is about bundling. Famously, it was said that you make money bundling and unbundling. Right now, it's about bundling. It's an existential threat if we don't figure out how to bundle. The workforce culture, I went through this for a year with the company that acquired us. That's a big shift. We were 3,500 people or so. And I can tell you what we did and how we managed that. But it's some people were running to it. There's like, I can't wait to do this. Other people like the same reaction that when the first time we introduced the macro, 10, 15 years ago, like anything that would automate a little task for them, right? It's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? So you're going to deal with some of that. I think it has to be led by the CEO with real skin in the game. Uh, you know, And all the opportunities should not come from the CEO. The people closest to the work are seeing what is ripe for some form of automation. Um, you will
And
also need to,
I want to put a pin on
yeah.
that one too, because I think that is from a lot of especially the smaller, mid-sized BPOs I talk to, there is a bit of a kind of command and control mindset that tends to exist in a lot of BPOs, where the CEO sets the strategy, sets the vision. This is what we're doing. We're going here, and like that cascades down. And there's a time and a place for that, but there that is going to be working against you in this new paradigm where you need the people that are closest to it on the bottom that are seeing the workflows to be feeling empowered to raise and elevate their ideas and feeling safe enough that they're not going to be kiboshed down. And so it's going to be the onus of the CEOs to really lead, like you're saying, lead that culture change, because it will be a culture change, to start becoming one of these really kind of decentralized corporate organisms.
And Amanda, they need to be incentivized as such, not only not punished, but actually incentivized. And the final point is that in spite of all of that, you will absolutely have to bring in some talent from the outside for such a large transformation. And that in itself, as we all know, can create some of its own type of issues. So it's one of those things where you have to go in again, eyes wide open. There's just no way around it. Like I think too, which also implies that now you're going to be competing with everyone else who's trying to hire really amazing AI talent. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's critical. You cannot have your IT manager lead this sort of work. And I say that with love and admiration for all IT managers. It's not in their wheelhouse. Myth number three is that we need to have an ROI to support the strategy, and I've heard this from some people too. You know, that is a peacetime posture. And I believe we're sort of in wartime footing right now. I think this is an existential issue, maybe not in the next 12 or 24 months or whatnot, but I mean, what is the ROI on your saving your business, saving your
Yeah.
cash flow, right? So I think, and again, don't take my word for it. The public markets are showing this with their pricing. Like, the pricing is a signal. It doesn't matter what I think. I mean, I think we all have access to the same information.
The Blockbuster
Um,
CEO would have not been able to make an ROI case for why they should have
they
leaned in on
spent
streaming, right?
Accenture charged Blockbuster. I have this information. This is way, way back in the day, $18 million, and we built a Netflix system for them. It was 18 million bucks back then. That's real money back then, right? It's probably closer to 60 right now. And we did it in a very short period of time. We built it for them. It didn't help. Even with unlimited access to capital, it did not help, right? So AI is both a challenge and an opportunity. And I don't want to be doom and gloom here. I don't think anyone is better situated to lead this type of new category creation than the people on this call. We know our customers' operations. We do it day to day. We have a lens to the work that no software company, I don't even care if it's an AI company, no software company will ever have. That is a real competitive advantage. It won't be sufficient to preserve the value long term. I don't believe that. But it is not something that should just be discounted and dismissed. And I think that there is something very special here. If you're going to commit to building, you got to move quickly. And I have not met many BPO leaders who are comfortable working and executing in sprints, like in 2 week commitments of shipping, right? Which is what a great tech company or product company, the cycle of innovation that they do. But this is basically what I'm saying here. Um, Option three is to sell. Um, and that's something I did, just sharing some numbers. I mean, we were a very high performing company. We had software like numbers in terms of like our net revenue retention. So we had lots of options. We actually explored private equity, and I'm so grateful that I had the support of our team, our leadership. We sort of walked away from that. I think it's soul crushing. I have my own views on private equity. We can take that offline. We found the right fit, and it happened to be with Crescendo. I had a relationship with Andy Lee prior, and so when I learned that he had started something that was combining AI and people to tackle this market, which was the thesis that I had been pursuing. We were able to get a deal done pretty quickly. So it's been a little over a year, and I'll tell you that it was not without pain and not without some challenges, again, around the change management of the employees and around the customer base. But looking at the data, looking at the conversion metrics, looking at the, what percentage of them left, what percentage of them stayed, how the business is performing, how the partners, that's what we call their customers, how their business is operating, the data is undeniable. I'm grateful that we were able to do this. Um, I just would say, like, if this is something you want to explore for yourself, I would just say commit to it because you're like, oh, we're gonna close this customer. It's gonna change this outcome. I, okay, good luck. That's fine because I think we're headed for very uncertain economic times, and I think access to capital will become more difficult. And I don't think these nosebleed AI valuations are going to last the way that they are right now. But I absolutely don't think that the BPO sector is going to somehow miraculously recover. I think that market's been permanently reset. So kind of it's a little bit of a timing. There's also a fourth option, by the way, which is for you to acquire an AI company. I didn't put that in there, and we can talk about that um, live right now. But that's, I think, something that I think it's worth kind of mentioning too. So anyway, I hope I've left 21 minutes for Q&A, and
Yeah.
let's go.
Awesome. We have one question so far, so please feel free to jump in if you have any other questions, but we can start this one. Do you think customers will leverage and trust BPOs to manage their AI agents or AI powered CX? Is this proposition better suited to SMB than enterprise?
Great question. Um, if your business model is such that you are still charging for people, there's no way they're going to trust you because you have conflict. Okay. So the only way they'll trust you is if you come back with a new business model that shows that, look, I'm not incentivized to charge you for adding more people. Um, I have an incentive to, in fact, manage your cost and your outcomes. So your money talks, right? So if you can figure out how um, to change that, if you can take ownership of the outcome and present that to them, with all the goodwill that you've built doing that work, I think you've got a real shot at being able to do that. Uh, I think a lot of the AI tooling will, I'm not going to say all of them will become a commodity because I think there's obviously differentiation. If you look at the ERP market, SAP and Oracle compete. There's a real difference between them. Um, but I think projecting out a year from now, the differentiation, some AI companies won't be around. Let's just say some of them are just not going to, they don't have the funding. It's just the chat GPT wrapper or whatever. They don't have a deep understanding of a domain. Let's call it CX as an example. They're sort of wannabe players and whatnot. I think they'll be wiped out. But amongst the ones that are there, they're going to be, a lot of them are going to be focused on the enterprise because those are longer contracts. Look at Sierra as an example. This is Brett Taylor's company. Brett Taylor he's the chairperson for OpenAI. He was the former co-CEO at Salesforce, and Sierra is going after the Fortune 500. That's where Accenture is going. I think whenever you're dealing with a smaller business, you're getting to the founder of the company or someone who has real skin in the game. You can have this sort of conversation with them, and I think that's what's necessary. So whatever your sweet spot is, where you can actually bypass a SOC audit or the whatever, and just sort of say, look, here's what we're doing. I want you to be an early adopter. This is what I'm thinking. This is what it's going to look like, and here's my value proposition. That's what it's going to take.
Yep, that makes sense. Second question. Who would you look to sell to? A bigger BPO with a bigger tech spend that is trying to make the transition, or a pure AI company like Crescendo was?
Really, really great question. if you're a bigger BPO, and I know the CEOs, I've had dinner with CEOs, Concentric, TaskUs, like the big ones, right? They're all spending a lot on technology. They're doing acqui-hires, they've been building for years, and now they're, shifting their focus to, specifically on AI. The question I would ask is, why would they buy you? What are you going to bring to them? Okay, why would, if you have a real thesis on why they should acquire you, then yes, they can be, it could be helpful. If you're a big BPO, you're not touching deals that are under 50 seats. It's inefficient. You're a public company. It doesn't move the needle. You got to do lots and lots of 5-seat deals, 10-seat deals. It doesn't even work, right? Again, a public company, right? We all know TaskUs tried to go private, didn't work out, right? So your buyers, I think, are on this call. It could be pooling together, right, to get some sort of scale. You will need scale, especially if you think about, we talked about use case scale, having enough of having hundreds of customers so that when you build tech, you can deploy it across. It's a very different. We're not building one-offs here. You're building something that's going to really transform the company. I think Crescendo is certainly a buyer. And if I were advising an AI company, contractually, I can't get involved in something like that. But if I were, I would. I'm an investor and an advisor to another AI and services company in a different sector, not in customer experience. And we are absolutely going to go buy a BPO. We're going to buy multiple BPOs in that market. I think the knowledge of doing the work is so valuable. Unfortunately, the market will never, it's just like a cab driver. The cab driver doesn't look at Google Map. They know the streets of Manhattan like the back of their hand. Okay. Unfortunately, the market doesn't value that. Look at the medallions. The medallions will never recover, ever. Okay. But do I appreciate taking a cab in Manhattan more than an Uber? Absolutely, I do. Absolutely, right? So for you, if you're considering this, I think it would be interesting with an AI company. Uh, Unfortunately, most pure AI companies, Crescendo I put on the side here, the way they've raised money, the multiples at which they raise money, which is just nosebleed and makes no sense to me
Yeah. Yeah.
whatsoever, um, they can't buy a BPO because you immediately become dilutive to their gross margins and EBITDA. They've presented themselves as a 75% gross margin business that has to get to 25, 30% EBITDA at some point in the future. But most importantly, it has to show scale. Your business, again, I'm generalizing, is maybe 20% EBITDA, right? And maybe 45% gross margin. You add these two things, and you're going to sink the AI company's
Leverage story.
P&L. Yeah, I'm not saying it's impossible, but having bought companies and sold companies multiple times, I don't there could be one-offs in very specific use cases, but as a generality, I don't see how that would work.
Do you have any examples of BPOs buying an AI company that are seeing success? And what challenges do you see with that approach?
I I know have been some small transactions, which I would call acqui-hires. You're really buying the team. There's a little bit of a product. It has some traction. I acquired one. It was machine learning specifically. And I think it could work out really, really well if you have a team comprised of the company that you've acquired and your key people that are incentivized 100% on conversion. So if I were going to do a deal like that, I'd say, like, it's a team, let's say it's four people, they have an AI company, they raised a couple million, they have so what revenue, it's like nothing, and they're competing in this huge space where there are like 1,000, CX AI tools out there, right? You really want the talent and the fact that they have a little bit of head start and they know how to build product. You don't, right?
Yep.
You do the deal. There's a little bit of cash up front, but basically the earnout is structured such that we say, let's say we have 100 customers. You take their four people, your four key people, your CFO, your head of delivery, like it's got to be all the key people, right? And say, hey, the eight of you, 100% of your bonus is tied to this one metric, and you let them cook. You just let them go to work, right? And I think so. I think like I personally know how to lead in an environment like that, and I think most BPO operators, we are scrappy. We are, we're not PowerPoint people. We roll up our sleeves and we get into the muck. I think most BPO operators, if they can get past their egos, if they can get past their like whatever, absolutely, I think they can do it because I think we're not precious people. We're durable and we're resilient, and I think that has real value that a 22-year-old in Silicon Valley just doesn't have. Like they don't understand that space.
Hmm. Are there any risks for a BPO acquiring an AI company, given that they have higher valuations? I'm trying to see how I understand that.
Given that the AI company has higher valuation,
Yeah.
an AI company that wants to sell to a BPO has basically figured out that the next round of financing is not going to be available as an up round. It's probably going to be a down round, right?
Mm,
And so their valuations, I mean, if there's a transaction to be had, it has to make sense to both parties, right? And you're betting on the future valuation. You're not betting on the present day. You're saying, look, if we come together, I'm a BPO, no secret, I'm 5 times EBITDA. You're an AI company, at some point you were, 20 times EBITDA, but right now you're running out of cash and you've got 6 months of runway and whatnot. So I think you can structure a deal. You just need to, if you're trying to maximize and juice everything, and unfortunately, a lot of BPO operators, and I know are this way, they're like maximalist in the short term. Like they're just like, and like, okay, if that's your attitude, it's going to be hard to woo an AI company to come in to come because this is about storytelling. It's about like how do we see the future? What kind of future do we want to build together? And are you willing to let go of a certain amount of control and let other people really take ownership of what they need to take ownership to lead that transformation? But Amanda, I absolutely believe it can be done.
awesome. Let's see. Let's go to um, you spoke about bundling. What do you believe the winning operating pricing model looks like for BPO in the next 3 years? Specifically, the balance between AI-driven automation, specialized human support, and nearshore, offshore labor, where the premium multiples concentrate.
That's a fantastic question. I'm going to get to the location first. And this reminds me of uh, a shift that occurred with utilities and power. Um, if I asked you, Amanda, right now, like the light that's in your background, what is the source of power for that electricity? Would you be able to tell me?
I would probably say Duke's power plant up the road. But
Right.
I only know that because my dad's in nuclear energy.
Would you know what percentage of that is coal versus wind versus solar
No,
versus, let's say, okay. So my thesis in 3 years,
oh no. It's leaving us hanging. That was such a good point, too. Hopefully he comes back. I see we have a lot more questions still coming in. And if we don't get to them, know that I will email them. We're going to kind of compile the answers and we'll email those out as well. But if we don't, and also if you want to, oh,
am
perfect.
I,
Okay, you're back.
is it
Yep.
working? Okay.
Yep. You left us
So
at the perfect. In 3 years, your prediction is
that the location will not even show up on the invoice.
Mm. Because it's just work being done, doesn't matter from where.
Yeah. I mean, back in the day, 10, 15 years ago, when you were building NOCs or data centers specifically, we would talk about location because we wanted, that distance to be shorter in certain areas now. And we had CDNs and things like that to make sure that, around latency of content and things like that. Today, we don't even think that way anymore because we have such persistent high grade connectivity. And I think something similar, there are smart people all around the world and everyone has access to them. So it's not defendable anyway. So my long-term thesis in 3 years is that your location will not even be exposed. No, it's not relevant. And my conviction, this is contrarian. A lot of people are talking about outcomes-based pricing. I think that's a stopping point for where we're actually headed. The short term, don't spend too much energy trying to retrain your customer, right? You want to have a simple conversation. We got to get to business, right? So I think that's fine. But longer term, my own research is leading me to think about something I'm calling vector-based pricing. And in physics, when we think about a vector, it's not just sort of a point in space, but it's also its velocity, right? I think there's some interesting business models that only BPOs plus AI can deliver. And this is around the type of value we unlock for our each transaction. Okay. This is very different than a race to the bottom, 99 cents per solve, then it'll be 89 cents per solve. This is compression-based transactional pricing. I'm not a fan of it long term. Short term, I get it. It's skin in the game. It's simple. Everyone jump into the boat. Let's keep moving. But longer term, my conviction is that there'll be much more creative business models. And I think, again, BPOs are uniquely situated in a way to influence what some of these new business models could look like if they can get out of their way. If you're still thinking about capacity and utilization and all the old school metrics that we grew up with and all that, I think you're going to have a hard time.
Can you give an example of what you mean by that vector-based pricing? Like
Yeah,
what are they
so
unlocking?
perfect. So there's a CX interaction. Someone someone was about to place a return. And in that CX interaction, we were able to not only, uh, instead of them being returned cash or credit, we actually found a different item that they liked even more, and they gave them a different item. That is far more valuable to the brand than, okay, I processed your return, 99 cents. No, 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 no. You stopped a $500 return, right? So I want to value capture that. I want to take a cut of that.
Mm,
Okay. And when
like
I'm
shared
doing
incentives?
commodity, I shouldn't be paid. Do you see what I'm
Mm.
saying? So we're talking about real value capture here. And again, it's not complex intellectually. It's pretty straightforward. But my God, is it hard to implement within a culture, right? And this is where I think again people on this call can lead, and you got to experiment with these various ideas. But yeah, that's like kind of long term where I think we're headed.
Mm. Awesome. Okay, we have a lot more questions. Let's see. We're using N8 N8N to automate our back office and disrupt ourselves, but it's shifting us from predictable BPO revenue to one-off project work. Do you see workflow automation builds with human in the loop QA as a sustainable model for BPOs transitioning to automation?
NAN, I'm not familiar with that, but I generally speaking, I understand what you're saying. I believe in human in the loop. I would, I think, I think again, that's also a point. I think long term, the term is going to become very different. That's essentially what crescendo is. Everything is humans and AI working together. And I think in QA, it's a great example of that. We want we want AI, and this is what we do. We want AI to score 100% of the interactions. Like we don't want to do the sampling and all that shit that we used to do back in the day when I built Apricot, right? We want AI to do all that, but we want the coaching, some of it to come from a human. We also want role playing. We want all that. So I think there's a place for both of those things. My only and I really love the idea of working on the back your sort of the non-billable portion, let's say, or the non obvious piece, like your the under the hood stuff, like QA. There's a race to change your math. What is the math? Your math is like the ratio of billable to non-billable people. If you can use AI to change that, that's a win. It's not sufficient, but that's a win. Then the other math is the customer interaction. You're going to need to introduce AI to automate some of that too. Okay, sorry. I know we only have a couple of minutes left. What other questions?
All right, let's do one more. Let's wrap it up. Based on everything you know today, after the sale, what, if anything, would you change or would you have done differently?
I appreciate that question. Um, I, I'm an advisor there, so I have I talk to the board and to our CEO, Matt, on a weekly basis. Um, I personally didn't realize how quickly we're gonna we're gonna start integrating and moving. And that's the thing about a small AI startup culture. It's very different than a BO. Like they moved really quickly, which is how I move. So, but still, we were like 3,500 people and whatnot. Like in March, my operating role was done. And I'm gonna just share this with you with people on this call personally. I did go through a bit of depression. I was like, you're going from being feeling important, your Slack and all that to like, to a weekly 1 hour meeting. I mean, it's a hard transition. And again, I would not have done anything differently with the structure of the deal, the terms, anything like that. But I think maybe just preparing myself a little bit more for that change. That doesn't have to happen to everyone. Here, you can negotiate a role for yourself. I was ready to stop working. I'd been grinding for years, but I was more ready intellectually than here to stop working, and that's been a learning process for me.
Thank you for sharing and for being vulnerable like that. Um, is there anything around the business, any business decisions not related to Crescendo itself, but or that the sale, but maybe like, oh, I wish I had done this thing. This could have gotten me a better multiple, or I wish I had not spent time getting distracted by this item. Like, is there anything around like that you would do differently?
Yeah, I mean, I had been building software pre-AI era, and you know what you can do today at a fraction of the cost. It's just like but it's a catch 22 because I'd been doing all of that. I was best positioned to really soberly assess what was going on in the world and to navigate the transaction. Um, there were some people that I hired that I wish I had not hired. They were very expensive mistakes. Um,
What
I,
were what not to go into specifics of
yeah.
that, but like, or were there lessons that you can share with the audience about
Here's the
that of
lesson.
like
Yeah, here's the
culture?
lesson that thank you for that. Here's the lesson. Okay. If you hire from big tech, you're hiring people that manage people. They're very effective in board meetings, investor calls, sales calls. This is about literally rolling up your sleeves and doing the work. I sold every deal at Partner Hero for the first 4 years. Every single one of them, the Skype call and then Zoom call came to me personally. Okay. I was an agent on our first client. I was a team lead on our second client. And I was a program manager for our largest program. Like I knew the operations inside and out. Okay. When you hire from big tech, sometimes you're hiring people who they've they're used to running a bureaucracy. They're used to running, they want to build an empire and whatnot. I'm not an empire builder. I want to get work done. Okay. I want to distribute the wealth with the employees. I want us to all win, right? And that cultural alignment, I made mistakes around that and they've been very expensive. I think having other people, outside counsel, some other people help vet the process, I think is something that I wish I had spent more time on.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I know we're running on late. We are over on time. We still have a bunch of questions here. Like I said to the folks while you were frozen there for a second, Shervin, we're gonna try our best to answer these questions. I'll shoot it out in our recap email along with the link to this webinar. Can you put up the slide with our contact info if anybody wants to reach out to us if they have any questions or want to get in touch? Yep. So they are uh I'm available. Sherman's available. Sherman, thank you so much for being open and vulnerable and putting this together and being a resource for your fellow community of BPO leaders. We really appreciate it.